Greetings and welcome to another chapter in our ongoing Vertical Measures webinar series. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Brad Ken and I'm the marketing manager here at Vertical Measures. And today we're very excited to present our first education-focused webinar titled Uncovering the Most Effective Content Marketing Strategy for Higher Ed. And it's hosted by our education aficionado, Mike Huber. Mike and I go way back. We've been working together for years. He's been a mentor of mine. Mike comes to Vertical Measures with 20 years experience in marketing and advertising. Starting out in newspaper advertising, Mike has seen the transformation from print to digital firsthand. For the past 15 years, Mike has been involved in online marketing, developed extensive PPC programs and organic SEO tactics, resulting in a significant growth, traffic, and revenue for his clients. In his free time, Mike enjoys fly fishing, spending time at his cabin up north, and cheering on his Jayhawks, Kansas City. Before we let Mike do his thing, I have a few notes to go over. Our most asked question before we get started on a webinar is if there will be a recording available. The answer is always yes. We'll email you all the recording and slides tomorrow morning, or you can find all of the webinars at verticalmeasures.com/webinars. If any questions pop up during the presentation, send them our way through the chat or questions tab, and we'll try to get to them during the Q&A at the end. If we run out of time and don't get to your questions, don't worry. Shoot us an email at webinars@verticalmeasures.com, or we should have some of your questions logged, and we do our best to follow up with you. Finally, we have a quick 5-question multiple choice survey at the end of our webinars. If you don't mind, please take a minute to fill it out. It definitely helps us improve our webinars and find what you guys think is most interesting, and so that we can get you guys the best content moving forward. So that's all for me. Without further ado, let's all welcome Mike Huber. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Brad. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time and signing up for the webinar today. We're going to talk about higher ed, and for those of you who are marketing to higher ed, it actually used to be pretty straightforward and simple. Before online, you would market to a 100-mile radius around the school. Things were actually pretty simple. But now with online, you're actually marketing to pretty much the entire world. Because anyone that has online classes is actually a competitor of yours now. And on top of that, it's a little bit more difficult simply because of the type of students that are out there. So instead of just someone transitioning from high school into college, you have adult learners, you have people who are going back to school for a higher degree, a graduate degree, and you have people who are interested in online as opposed to on-campus classes. So we're going to talk about some of the tactics and strategies that we use here at Vertical Measures, things that we've proven, techniques that we use that we know really drive traffic, and in your case can actually drive prospective students to your admissions department. I just want to mention a couple of things about Vertical Measures. Obviously, you know who we are because you've signed up. But these are a couple of key things that we focus on, and we feel that we are the best at helping our clients build their digital audiences, and it's an audience that they own. And I'll talk more about that because I think that's really, really important. And then the other thing is that we measure everything we do. In fact, I'll show you a slide coming up pretty quick here about the measurement and why we think it's so important. So just a little bit more about Vertical Measures. Brad already mentioned, gave some background about me. I actually have been with Vertical Measures almost 8 years. I've been in the space forever. And I talk at conferences all around the U.S., and you may have heard me or even some other Vertical Measures speakers at digital summits or Content Marketing World or some of the other digital and marketing conferences that are out there. And we practice what we preach at Vertical Measures. In fact, myself and a number of other authors internally have written another book on digital marketing, which is going to publish in early 2019. And after it publishes, it'll be available for free download too. So just think about that, put that on your calendar. I wanted to show you this slide of client results that we get. And I don't show this to sell you on Vertical Measures. I'm showing you this because the techniques that I'm going to talk about are how we get to these results. For clients that have been with us 3 months, they see an increase in traffic of 20%. After 6 months, it's 22%. Within a year, it's 66%. And after 2 years, it's 167%. So those increases in traffic in many, many cases are transformational for universities. And the things that I'm going to show you are tested techniques that we use to get these kind of results. And part of that is actually owning an audience. And I spoke about that just a second ago, and I wanted to give you a little bit more detail in terms of what we mean by owning an audience. And for us, we have 3 tiers. And the third tier is a short-term audience. It's someone that we know is interested in us to some degree because they've come to our website, and we have cookied them, and we're going to retarget them because we know that they had some interest in what we're going to try to do with our paid media is bring them back. Second tier is a non-owned audience, and these people we know are even more interested in us because they're following us on another platform. So it could be on LinkedIn, it could be on Facebook, but we know there's a higher interest level. The difference here is that platform owns that audience. They have their name and their email address because they joined that channel or platform. And what we're trying to do in our tier 1 is own that subscriber. We want them to download a piece of content. We want them to fill out a form, give us a lead capture information, because we know that once they do that, we own them as an audience. And the key here is that now we don't have to pay, we don't have to go to another channel to get in communication with them. We actually send them email, and we do lead nurture and particular workflows. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. A couple of examples about owning your audience. They have absolutely nothing to do with higher ed, but they're really good illustrations in terms of the value of owning an audience. And what we want is that tier 1, we want to be able to communicate directly with them. The first example I have is of Domino's Pizza. In 2008, their business was cratering. They really had lousy pizza. They had a viral video go out that was just really terrible. It showed some things that they were doing in making the pizza. And the CEO at the time got everybody together and said, hey, it's time to hunker down and let's get this ship straightened out. And what they did is, first of all, they made better pizza. And then the second thing they did is they focused in online. And now over 60% of their customers are actually coming from digital channels. And along with that, on their online platform, they really worked on their digital ordering. And that keeps costs down and makes things a lot more effective and efficient. And because they focused in online, they actually have 15 million users in their database. And they see this as a main competitive advantage over other pizza and over other fast food. And one of the other critical things is the value of owning that audience has taken their stock price from $3 a share, and I checked this morning, it's actually at $2.79. So there's huge value in owning that audience because you can communicate directly with them. The second example I have is actually of Dollar Shave Club. Many of you probably know about this company, but they're a subscription-based company, and they sell shaving cream and razors. And they built up this database of users and subscribers to the point where Unilever, who's a consumer package company, actually bought them for $1 billion. And certainly Unilever wants to sell more razors and shaving cream, but as a consumer packaged goods company, now they have direct access to a consumer, where their current model was a wholesale to retail because they sold their products in grocery stores, and now what they can do is go directly to that consumer because Dollar Shave Club built that audience, and instead of selling wholesale, they can sell retail direct to the consumer. So there's huge value in owning the audience. And today relationships are actually created with information and not people. So owning that audience and being able to communicate with them is really, really important. And one of the stats that's out there is 57% of the purchase decision, and in your case, the college or program decision is completed before anyone actually reaches out to admissions. Information is really critical, and it's a key to your success. Hang on a second. My computer's doing some funny things here. It's not letting me advance to my next slide. Here we go. All right, so what I want to do is talk about how the journey now is different than it used to be. So before, we really focused in online, and the prospective student really needed all of this really critical information. Marketing was really focused on awareness. We were trying to bring more people into this funnel so we could have our sales department or our admissions department actually work with this prospective student in the consideration and decision and advocacy phase. So that's the way it used to be, but because people are consuming all of this information and they're sales avoiders, they don't want to talk to anyone in admissions until they're absolutely ready. So marketing actually has to pick that up and do awareness, consideration, and advocacy as part of that student journey, where admissions now is really focused on that decision phase. And it's really important that you know what your journey is. And in some cases, you may have multiple journeys depending on the school, the programs, whether it's campus-based or it's online. But the key here is to really know what that journey is. Because what you want to do is have content that's appropriate for each one of these stages of the journey, and you got to know what the journey is first. And what I want to do now is just really illustrate what a journey might look like. And we put a fictitious student journey together, and I'm going to walk you through this. And it's important to note the stages of the journey, the different touch points this prospective student has, and the content that supports that journey along the way. So Laura's journey is something that we put together. Laura is actually a registered nurse. She's a career mover. She loves her job, but she's ready for something else. She's been in this position for about 8 years. And as a persona, this is something that we developed. And she's a millennial, and like most millennials, actually like most people, we are sales avoiders. And based on that, Laura's journey is about gathering the information that she needs to help her make a decision to go back to school and get an advanced degree. Laura becomes aware of our university, which is Coronado University. It's something else. It's just a fictitious university. But she finds us on LinkedIn, and she's part of a group on LinkedIn, which many of us are. And this is our second tier audience, right? She's following different groups, and she comes across us here, and she finds an article. Now, you're a nurse. Where do you go from here? So as she's thinking about going back to school in this awareness phase, this is the right information that she needs to actually start this awareness phase and go into more of a consideration phase through that student journey. And she clicks on the link that's actually in the article on LinkedIn, and it takes her to the page on the website. And for us, it's a spoke. And I want to talk a little bit more about hub and spoke content marketing, which is part and parcel of one of the techniques that we use to really drive this owned audience. And as she's reading this, now you're a nurse, where do you go from here in this spoke, she's directed to a hub piece of content. And the hub piece of content is actually an interactive quiz. What type of nurse practitioner degree should I get? And as we go through this, I'm going to describe what Hub and Spoke is all about. And the first part of it is she takes this quiz and interacts with the website. So she's gone from awareness now into the consideration phase. And what Hub and Spoke looks like is this. And the Hub is this interactive or complex piece of content that's supported by spokes. So those spokes can be anything from an offsite article to a press release to newsletters to email, really anything that's going to drive traffic to a hub piece of content. And what's important for us is that hub piece of content is where they trade their personal information and they become part of our database and part of our owned audience. And then for Laura, what happens is she takes the interactive quiz and she's presented with this form fill at the end where we actually capture her name and her email address. Now, in this particular case, the threshold for information is really low because she just met us and just introduced her to our website and to our classes and programs. So we make this threshold really pretty low in terms of lead capture. one of the things that happens after she does that, she gets presented with a thank you page. In a lot of cases, what happens here is we send a generic thank you page, and we're not really thinking about that student journey and the next step that Laura needs to take. Really what we want to do is offer up other content that she can actually click on a link and go back to our website and take her further down that student journey. A lot of opportunity is missed with generic thank you pages. In addition to that, oftentimes we'll send out a generic email that says thank you as well. The key here is to get her to come back and consume more content on the website, so we're actually presenting her with another link with content that is relevant to the content that she already consumed. Our software and platforms are sophisticated enough that we can personalize messages based on where someone's been on the website and based on what content they've downloaded. So it's really important that in this consideration phase, we're reaching out to her again with a couple of more touch points that can get her to come back to the website. In our particular story, Laura is not convinced yet. So what do people do? They go to to Google to find out more information. So she does a couple more searches. She's really trying to figure out exactly what nursing degree she wants to get. Part of it's based on how much money she can make doing this. But we all do the same thing. We all go back to Google or some other search engine to really get all the information that we need before we make a decision. And in this case, Laura finds us again, another piece of spoke content, which leads her now to another hub piece of content, which is a free guide. We know because she's interacted with us a number of times, this is a more complex piece of content. On the form fill, we're going to ask her for a little bit more information. We know she trusts us. She's starting to see us as an authority, so we know that the threshold in terms of lead capture can actually be more in depth. And in this case, we're asking how soon she wants to go back to school. And in this case, she says 6 months. Now, when you think about the content that you're going to send in your lead nurture, these timeframes are really important. You're going to send something different to someone who's going to go back to school in 6 months as opposed to someone who's ready to go to school in 2 years. Content's different. The cadence is different. This is really important information to know. And as Laura goes through her journey and considers more about what she wants to do, she likes our university. She is now in a position where she feels trusting enough, and she's not going to avoid the admissions department. In fact, she contacts admissions, and she has a really good conversation with the admissions department. She's still not ready, and that's where amplification or paid media really helps us, because we're going to keep retargeting Laura. She's going to see us in her social media channels. We're going to push testimonials out to her and potentially have more one-to-one chats with her to actually get her to become a student. And in our scenario, she does become a student. She enrolls and becomes actually an evangelist in this advocacy stage of our journey. So the thing that I want you to take away from here is, A, you have to know what your journey is, and B, you've got to have content in each stage of that journey, because what could happen is you could get Laura really excited about a particular program or advanced degree, and because you don't have content in each stage of that journey, she could fall out of your journey into someone else's, and they could close her on being a student there rather than have you do that. And so how do you come up, or what are some examples of some things that you can do in terms of hub and spoke? These are an example. Month 1, we create an ebook and we do 14 posts for spokes. Month 2, another gated piece of content, more spokes. Month 3, another gated piece of content, and more blog posts along the way. And when you look at this, you're probably thinking to yourself, how in the heck can we get all of this done? And more than that, how are we going to come up with 15 different ideas in month 1 and about the same number of ideas as we go forward? Part of that is actually using a process that we've been actually teaching people for about 6 years. And it's one of the things that we know really helps drive traffic, and it's also something that really helps build your own audience. And the way that we start is we actually go to Google, and we do the auto-suggest or the autocomplete because we know that when people are actually searching and Google throws this autocomplete up, this is actually something that people are actually searching for, and we know it's a criteria that's of interest based on our main keywords and priority keywords. And in this example, we're actually seeing that best colleges for nurse practitioners comes up as an autocomplete. Now, I want you to keep this in mind as we look at this, because this is the first step. Now we know what people are actually searching for, so we actually do a search on Google, and this best colleges for nurse practitioners, we find that there's an ad where they're talking about nursing, but they're not addressing that title specifically. And we also find 35 best nurse practitioner degrees, which kind of talks about best colleges for nurse practitioners, but no one is addressing this specifically, or in this case, anything that's word for word. And we know because people are searching for it and no one is addressing it specifically that it's an opportunity to create content that's going to get found. It's a two-step process. It's very effective. We've been using it for years. It seems very simplistic in nature, but if we know people are searching for a particular topic and no one is addressing it, it gives us a content opportunity. And as you're doing searches on Google, you'll also see people also ask, you'll see related searches. It just gives you more ideas in terms of the kind of content that you should be creating. And in this example, both in people also ask and related searches, people want to know how long it takes to complete a particular program. So think about these things as you're doing ideation and coming up with all the topics and themes that you're going to create in terms of hub and spoke. The next thing you got to do is put all of this stuff in a calendar. And for us, we get really specific. We want to know what format it is, what the word count target might be, the titles, who's going to do it, and what the deadlines are. And once you do this, it makes it a lot more real, especially when you assign deadlines to it. So make sure that the content ideas end up in a spreadsheet. And we also use a number of different tools to help us on the ideation phase. In some cases, we don't know all the keywords that people are thinking about when they're typing things in. So actually, even before we go to Google Suggest, we're using tools like keywordtool.io. We're also using a website called Answer the Public. It's actually got a kind of a creepy homepage, and my laptop is acting up again. Bear with me just a second. It should clear up here in just a second. There we go. So with Answer the Public, when you type in a keyword phrase, it actually presents you with questions and prepositions, comparisons, alphabetical list of different keywords, and then also related keywords. It's actually a really good tool. We use it quite a bit. We also use Moz Keyword Planner. They did some updates to it earlier this year. It's actually a really good tool to help you with keywords. And then also you can use YouTube, which is the second most searched search engine, also owned by Google, to give you other ideas on what people are actually typing in, what they're searching for, so you can create content that people are actually searching for. The other thing that you have to realize is that if you create titles that are ambiguous and aren't what people are searching for, they won't ever find you. This example is the title is The Beast Within, and the actual article is about videos of cute animals and cats. And no one would ever type The Beast Within as a search term, but they might type in videos of cute animals and cats. And to go a little bit deeper on that, what you've got to do is you've got to satisfy your audience in terms of the content that they're looking for, and you have to present it in a way that you're going to satisfy Google as well, because you want to get found. And most content writers have been trained as journalists. And as journalists, what we try to do is create headlines that are going to attract people into our particular article. And if you're creating headlines like these, what journalists need to know about SEO, and here's my political humor: there will be hell to pay, and how Facebook killed Christmas, and read this article before your next workout. There's one thing that all of these titles have in common, and that is no one would ever type these in as a search phrase on Google or any of the other search engines. So what you've got to do is you've got to create headlines that people are searching for. So in Laura's example, how much does the DNP make? What's the best college for that DNP degree? How can I finance it? And the best online university for advanced nursing degrees. Really what you want to do is for every piece of content, ask yourself these questions. Would my audience actually search for it? Does it have a specific purpose? Is it educational? Is it easy to read? And then finally, would I read and enjoy it? And if you can answer all those questions, it's going to put you in a good place. And then the question becomes, how much content do you need in each stage of the journey? We use this as a rule of thumb. In the awareness phase, 50% of the content on your site should be in that phase, consideration 30, decision 15, and advocacy about 5%. How much do you have in each stage of this journey? If you don't know that question, really what you want to do is a gap analysis where you crawl your website, you find out all the different content that you have, and then based on the content ratios in each stage of that journey, you can set priorities to build more content in each stage that is light. So for example, we use Screaming Frog. It's a software that you download on your computer, and it will actually crawl your website and give you a list of every single page that you have, the meta tags that are supporting it in terms of the title and description and those kinds of things. And then you can port that to Excel and then manipulate the data so you know exactly what you have on your site and where the gaps are so you can create additional content. And again, we really focus on hub and spoke because we know there's a huge value in that. And some of you may be saying, well, you know, hub and spoke sounds really good, but maybe I don't want to gate every complex piece of content. And we use different variants too. Sometimes we want that really nice piece of content to get indexed and get found for SEO value. So we'll do things like put calls to action within a piece of content that says, yeah, give me this piece of content as a PDF, or download the whole article as a PDF so you can read it and reference it later. So these are things that we do if we want to have our really good hub pieces of content found by the search engines. The last thing I want to talk about is actually lead nurture, and I think it's really important. And as I talked about a little bit earlier, the complexity of the student journey, of the different variants, both campus and online, the different programs, the different schools, the different timelines that people have, you've got to have an automated lead nurture platform. There's no way that you can manually keep up with all the different avenues and different messages that you're going to send to this owned audience. And sometimes it's really simple. You might send out just a workflow that has 6 emails in it. The key here and the takeaway on the slide is that every time you send an email out, the goal really is to get them to come back to your website or to take that next step and talk to your admissions department. So it's really important that the messaging within those emails is appropriate, and the only way you can do that really is with an automated system. We use something called Autopilot HQ. It's a drag and drop visual that can actually help you set up different lead nurture workflows. And having that visual really helps because oftentimes the content that's presented to someone, if they click a certain link, you may send them a different email versus this other link that they may have clicked. So having this visual and be able to actually see the different avenues or channels that people would use based on the content they consume is actually really helpful. Another really good website is called Really Good Emails. And oftentimes we get challenged on the creative side. We're just trying to figure things out. And, you know, we don't know exactly what our email should look like, how we should illustrate or put imaging within an email. And this website has a bunch of different categories, and they post emails almost every single day. It's a really good place to learn and find out some different ideas about good quality emails. The only way that you can tie these tactics that I've talked about together is to actually have an effective digital marketing strategy. If you do some of the things that I suggested and you don't have a strategy, you're going to miss opportunity because you won't have really identified all the things that you need to do in order to be more effective and efficient. So for us, we always start with a strategy, and that includes a competitive analysis. We develop personas, and for you, it could be based on programs in colleges and whether they're adult learners or they're high school students transitioning to college. We always look at social media. Lead nurture is really, really important. Paid media, because you want to bring people back. You want to do that retargeting like I spoke about earlier. You've got to tie everything back to strategic initiatives. And oftentimes you are competing internally with other departments and other schools. So there's this co-opetition within the university because you're trying to get resources, and you've got to align all of that stuff with the strategic initiatives of the school. And then finally, you need to have a content roadmap and have all of the things put together that you need in order to be the most effective. So to recap, you've got to know your student journey. You got to create content for each stage of that journey. You got to use Google to help you with the titles and themes. That simplistic process that I showed you, it may be simple, but boy, it is extremely effective. You've got to focus on owning that audience because there's huge competitive value in that. And you got to set up workflows based on interests and how you segment your prospective students. So we're going to hang around here for a few more minutes. Brad, I'm going to turn it back over to you for questions.
No problem, Mike. Thank you very much. That was very informative, and I think it helped our audience quite a bit get started on Hub and Spoke. It's been a really effective strategy for us, for clients across all industries, but especially higher ed. So let's jump into some questions. The first one, Mike and I actually talked about a little bit before the webinar, comes from Maria, and it's, what differences are you seeing for grad and undergrad marketing?
As we talked about this earlier, we're not seeing so much a difference between grad and undergrad as we are in the different types of students, potential students. And, you know, we talked about that a little bit earlier in terms of, you know, that high school transitioning to college, the adult learner who wants to just come back maybe for a class or two to learn something specific, and then the online student. So the difference is really not so much in graduate and undergraduate. It's more in terms of the types of students, especially with online being available, those online campuses being so available to everyone across the planet.
The next question is from Selena, and she asks, how effective are university rankings in the eyes of students?
In terms of rankings, my assumption is the ranking of the school itself in terms of the quality of the program or the university itself. Obviously, that's going to be one of the factors that helps someone decide whether to go to that school or take that program. For us in Arizona, ASU has the Carey School of Business. It has a great reputation. So within that reputation, some of that student decision is going to be made based on that. But more than that, I think students today are interested in, if they're attending campus classes, they want to know more about the campus, they want to know about professors, they want to know a lot of different information, and that ranking factor is just one of the decision points along the way. For others, you know, it may be the ranking factor based on the reputation of the school, but I think there's more elements that play into that than just the rank.
So this is kind of a loaded question. It comes from Leanne, and I can help talk through this. She asked, can you share any tips on creating and sustaining a new content hub? And I think what she's asking is just kind of the process from ideation to maybe rolling out that hub. So with brevity, maybe we could talk through that process.
Sure. So one of the things that we run into quite often is companies and universities that have these really big goals in terms of creating content. And what they fail to do is look at their internal and external resources to see if they can actually create all that content they're thinking about doing. So the first thing is actually what I showed earlier in the webinar, is that you've got to put all of your titles and ideas for content into a spreadsheet. And once you do that, you can identify who it is that's going to help you create that content. And I think doing that will actually help you identify resources that you have that can actually deliver the content, but it can also show you that you may need some more help. And really, that's what I would think of, in terms of setting up something that's repeatable and something that's going to be long term, because you got to have deadlines, you got to have the resources to create it. And Brad, if you want to add anything to that.
I think you covered it. And actually, this next question from Stacy kind of dovetails nicely. And she's talking about graphics and if we've seen any types of graphics or images that are more effective versus others for that type of content hubs. And my answer to that is it and this is kind of a cliche answer, is it depends on your personas, but you can learn that through effective measurement. So if you're seeing that your audience is engaging more with video content or infographics, if your content is more technical in nature and you want something easier to digest, you might want to consider creating smaller bite-sized graphics. There's not a one type of content that seems to work best over the others. There's certainly a push towards video because attention spans are shorter online. They're looking for answers and a human connection to build trust with a brand or organization. So I've taken a liking to video lately, but we've had great success with designing valuable graphics. And it just depends on what you're ideating and what type of content you're creating. So I think we
And
have, oh, I'm sorry.
just to add to that too, there are a couple of reasons to create graphics. One is for the user to consume that on your website. The other thing that you can do with those graphics is you can cut those up and use those in social media channels. And if you've not branded those heavily, it's actually a linkable asset. It's actually something that another website would love to link to, especially if it's high quality. So not only can you have your user consume that, but you can actually use it as ammunition to get backlinks to your site.
So I think we have time for one more. This is a question that our internal team asks a lot, just to kind of get a better bearing of when do these customer journey stages stop and begin. So her question is, what type of content do you consider awareness versus what type of content do you consider consideration? And from what we've seen, and there's not a set answer. In fact, the book that we're releasing in early 2019 is about the customer journey. So we've dove into this quite a bit. The awareness stage can actually happen pretty quickly depending on your industry. It could even involve some traditional marketing or traditional advertising. It could be a billboard or a radio spot that you hear and helps kind of stimulate that awareness of maybe I should look into going back to school, or maybe I'm not fulfilled in my position and there's career options for me, or continuing education so that I can advance my career. Those type of awareness pieces of content would be very top of funnel. And then when you start to move them through that customer journey, the consideration type of content would be more of those answering the questions that they're asking in Google, something that's going to move them closer to making a decision, whether it's to enroll into a new school, buy a new car, buy hiking boots. There's ideation that has to take place in each stage: awareness, consideration, decision, and actually a fourth stage of advocacy. And if you don't have content in each four of those stages, there could be a large content gap, and your audience is going to search for those answers, and they're going to find those answers. You want them to find those answers on your website. If they don't find them on your website, they're going to have no choice but to drop off your funnel and join with somebody else, or give their business to a different organization. Do you have anything to add to that, Mike? Sorry, I kind of took that one from you.
No, actually, I think you answered that really well. So nothing
All
to
right.
add.
Okay, well, I think that's all the time that we'll have for Q&As, and we actually did cover all the questions that we got from the audience. So thank you again, Mike, for presenting this webinar. For all of you still listening, tune in next month for our final webinar of 2018. Registration will be up in early December, so check back on our social channels, and we might send out a follow-up email if you're interested. Until then, I'm Brad Ken with Vertical Measures. Have a happy holiday season, everyone. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.